When you read sacred text or anything that was written a long time ago, consider one, it was written by men. Two, the audience that they imagined would be reading it were also men. The mistake we've done as women is we read these sacred texts and we believe that it is inclusive of us. And when someone is being told to do something, we think it also applies to us. Here's an example. In some sacred texts, like the Bible, it talks about the flesh being weak, right? And to guard yourself against lust and desire. Now, as a woman, do you understand that that message was likely not specifically for you? That message was written by men for other men. So what has happened over time is, as women read these sacred texts in these books, we think it is the whole of humanity. But the truth is, they weren't thinking about you when they wrote these books. Another example, a lot of sacred texts will say, don't be so selfish, be selfless, be giving. Women are already that way. You don't need to be more selfless. You don't need to give more. You are already giving more than you should. That was written for men. So as you continue to read these books, reconsider, was this message originally intended for me or was it intended for men? And now because we live in this inclusive and equal world, I'm reading this and I'm thinking it's telling me how to be, but I am already this way. And this was written for my reproductive counterpart. How might that liberate you in the way you live your life?
Ooh, wee. Did y'all hear what Nana Stella said? Oh man, when I heard this, I mean, all the light bulbs went off. I was like, God damn, bitch, you is right. You is right. Think about it. You know, we're living by these codes of conduct, you know, especially when it comes to like religious people and not even religious people, right? Like there's a lot of people who look to religious texts like the Bible and other religious texts as guidance in this world, whether they're religious or not, right? And, you know, it's interwoven into our country and our rules and laws as well, right? And it's just, it's so interesting. You know, she did such a great job of articulating this idea that who was this intended for when it was written? Who was this rule book? Who was these ideas? Who was, for example, the Bible, etc.? Who were these rules and laws and ideas? Who was the intended audience? And the fact that we as women assume that the intended audience was the swath of humanity, all of humanity, when in reality, we were not considered. We were an afterthought. Let's keep it real. How often do men think about women when they do anything? Let's keep it motherfucking real, okay? How often do men consider women when they're doing anything? They don't think about us, especially in this patriarchal society that we live in. Right? When the patriarchs wrote the Bible, put it together, when the patriarchs wrote the laws of the land, they weren't thinking about us. When they came up with all of these, you know, these life lessons and rules and regulations for comporting ourselves as human beings, they weren't thinking about us. They were men talking to other men. And we got swept up in that, thinking that they're talking about us because they're talking about, quote, all of humanity, right? All men are created equally, right? When they're saying men, who they talking about? They talking about humans, right? They act like they're talking about everybody, but the truth is they're really talking about men because they're not considering us. They're not thinking about us. And so just like she says, like, what would that do? How would that liberate you as women to consider that maybe all of these prescriptions and ideas and thoughts and rules and regulations were never meant for us? Like she said, you know, they talk about, you know, being mindful of being lustful. Are we the lustful ones? No. Are we the ones that have no control over our sexual impulses? No. Are we the ones out here graping, as they say, graping children, animals, and dead people? No. So was this really designed for us? Same thing with regard to being selfless and being giving. Like she said, we already naturally are that way. And you can say that that's nature versus nurture. And even if it is nurture, we were conditioned and socialized to be that way. So we already are that way. So when it says to be giving and selfless, it's like we already are. So we draining ourselves. And you see that reflected in the society. Women are drained in this society, especially mothers and wives. Drained because we're giving more than we have, because we are thinking, oh, well, the Bible says this and the Quran says this, and and this philosopher said this. They weren't thinking about us. They were talking to other men. It was men talking to other men. There's another creator. Another creator, she also addressed this, and when I saw it, I was like, I love her take on this as well.
Jesus and Buddha and all of them, all of their teachings were made for men. They experienced life through a male vessel. To be more compassionate, to be more sweet, to be more selfless. Yes, to be more like women, to balance their feminine energies. Those messagings, those are for men. Women, we have to have our own spiritual practices. We have to have our own stuff. Okay, we're already naturally empathetic and passionate and selfless. We got to go the opposite direction in order to balance our masculine or feminine energies. We have to understand how to set boundaries. We have to understand how to be selfish, how to put our needs before anybody else's, because an empty cup ain't gonna fill up nobody's. This is the power of divine feminine energy. It is divine once you learn how to balance your masculine and your feminine energies. This is when you step into your goddess era. Okay? It's nice to be compassionate and sweet, but then you got to stomp out that people pleaser part of you, because now you're being used and abused. Step into your goddess era by being more selfish, putting yourself first, prioritizing your own needs. Self-care is the best care.
And that was Secrets of the Siren. If you want to find them, you can find them online at TikTok at Secrets of the Siren. Okay, I love her take on this too, the balancing of our masculine and our feminine energies, because as everything in this universe, we exist in duality. We have both the masculine and the feminine, the go and the come, the pull and the push, the negative and the positive, the light and the dark. These are all just words for the two energies that exist in this universe, right? It's just the difference between attraction and repulsion, right? Go out and get it, sit back and receive the feminine and the masculine energies. And I love how she talks about how, that these teachers came to us in male vessels. I love that she talked about that the Buddha, that Jesus, all of these folks came to us in male vessels. I love that she broke that down, because it's so true. It's like, yeah, they, if you think, listen, you can believe what you want to believe. I'm just going to rock with this and just rock with me and take what you will and take what you don't. But, if the consciousness that decided to incarnate into Jesus, into the Buddha, into these philosophers, they chose a male vessel in a patriarchal society. That's not by accident, right? They chose to incarnate into a male vessel. Why? So they could be an example for what? Males in a overly masculine, hyper masculine, toxic masculinity society, the patriarchy that we have now and that has existed since biblical times. And that's not by accident, that's by design. And so they chose to come in this male vessel, and they chose to do that so that they could be an example for males and so they could teach males. And again, in the patriarchy, they wasn't thinking about us, ladies. We're an afterthought. They don't give a damn about us. They were talking to, when they're saying we human beings need to be, they were talking to other men. It's not an accident or coincidence that all of Jesus's disciples, most of them, the vast majority of them are men. It wasn't all, but the vast majority of them. It's not a mistake. And then, we don't have time to get into Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Jesus, because there's so much more to it. Maybe we'll get into it in another episode. But, there's a lot out there that says that Mary Magdalene and Mary, his mother, were actually his equals in terms of being his, quote, disciples. Okay. So think about that. Think about what she said in terms of like, just like what the previous person said, Nana Stella, that, this idea that we have to be selfless in giving, we already are. And like Secrets of the Siren said, you can't fill anything up from an empty cup. So if we're wearing ourselves down so much that we're emptying our cup, how can we now fill up other people's cups? But guess who got the full cups in society? Guess who got the full cups in society? Right? Because in a patriarchal society, the patriarchy focuses on filling up males' cups, filling up the cup of men at the expense of women and children and animals and the environment. So I want us as women to reconsider all of these life lessons, all of these, prescriptions for life, these sacred texts, all of these, these, what do you call it? Like sayings that we have about, the right way to live, and question whether or not those were intended for us women. Whether they were intended for us, if we were the intended audience. And if we weren't the intended audience, what does that mean moving forward, and how would that change things? And this reminded me when I heard these two folks speaking on this, it reminded me of my own awareness that I had come to about the notion of human nature.